no.
Across the nation to defund the police.
To end policing as we know it.
Off the charts violence in New York City. 11 people shot in just 8 hours on Sunday.
This is about the police officers who every single day put on that uniform and they run towards danger when we run away from it.
Guns up, giddy up. Welcome to Failure to Stop Nightshift, baby. Failure to Stop, the #1 show where police meets society and culture you have stumbled into. Nightshift, which is our true crime episode, comes out every Tuesday night with Andrea Upland and myself. Today's show is brought to you by ghostbed.com and stamps.com. You can head over to ghostbed.com/wolfpack and get you a sleep so good it's scary, or you can keep life simple with stamps.com/wolfpack, where you can mail stuff out from the comforts of your own home using a printer, your own laptop, and a scale that they give you. You can schedule your pickup times, the whole 9 yards. We love stamps.com. We love Ghostbed, but more importantly, we love true crime. Good evening, Andrea. How are you?
That's right.
How are you doing today?
Great. Hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all. You ready for, we got a meetup coming up on the 12th. It's right around the corner. Right around the corner. There's a lot of people coming.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah, man, I'm really pumped. One more and I'm out of here. Podcast guys are going to be here. It's going to be a real hoot and a real holler. Can't wait to meet a lot of you folks in person for the first time. Before we jump into tonight's show, by the way, tonight's show is the Somerton Man, Australia's wild mystery death. Did I say that right?
It is. I'm so excited about this one. Like, legitimately, I'm always excited for Night Shift. I love talking to you guys. I love telling these stories, but this one I read about a long time ago, and I've never gotten quite as into it as I did this past week. And I say it every time, I feel like every week, but we could have episode after episode after episode and still not really get to the bottom of this. So it's one where a lot of big questions were answered that opened up a whole lot of other questions that have yet to be answered. So it's very interesting, and can't wait to talk about it.
So what you're saying is that this might be a good one to do some follow-up episodes on our Patreon account that launches sometime next week. It actually accidentally launched this week, and then somebody subscribed to it. Like, it was only up for a matter of like an hour or so, and somebody already tried to subscribe. We refunded that person. It's not ready yet, but we do have our Patreon account for our audio listeners, because we do have the live chats that you'll hear us addressing on the YouTubes. 99.9% of our listeners are on audio. However, we do have paid memberships on YouTube if you want to support us. And so there's about 162 chats right now going on, and we're only 4 minutes into this show. But, we're always addressing the YouTube chats, and we heard from our paid listeners that were like, yo, why do the YouTubers get a little paid gig and none of us audio folks get a paid behind the scenes and extra added content? So we heard you. We listened to you. We're much like the well-oiled government that we live under, where we hear your complaints and then we fix them. So what we did was we went and created a Patreon where there's going to be tons of extra content, so we can do things like Andrea just said, follow-up episodes.
Yeah.
We can have John and Andrea, who both like true crime in different ways. They can kind of collaborate and come up with some short shows. We've got comedians that come on and do stuff, and we've got other breakdown guests that come on. So if you want to be a part of our Patreon, just stand by for that. Before we dive into the Somerton man, Australia's wild mystery death, Andre, is there any true crime news updates that we want to get out of the way?
Yeah, not a ton, but we will go on and touch back on the Stephen Smith case that we know has been opened back up about the Murdaws. So Stephen Smith, the boy that was found in the middle of the road, we can do, actually, I wouldn't mind to do another follow-up full episode on that, or maybe a partial one on Patreon. That wouldn't be a bad idea. But his body was in fact exhumed. Mom is offering a $35,000 reward for anything leading to information about his what she calls for sure murder, and it is being looked at as such now. They are investigating as though it is for sure a murder. But we talked about the fact that his body was going to be exhumed, and since we last talked, it has been. And we don't really have much more information yet. Of course, we don't have any kind of answers from that yet, but we know that the ball is rolling there, and they're getting it done, and that big reward has come out. So that's about it for updates. Nothing new. And
Falconator comes out with us in the chat. She says, you want to talk about true crime? How about Kid Rock murdering that beer today? I think that was a justified homicide, in my opinion, of him murdering beer. I just currently made a reel that's all in comedy. It's all just for funsies. It's funny, but listen, I've been saying since day one that Bud Light is gay as fuck. And now they've just come out of the closet. It's not a big deal. It's kind of like when who came out of the closet that nobody, like Ellen. We all knew it. We all knew it, baby. It's all right. We all knew Bud Light was gay. It's just coming out. It's okay. Not a big deal. But you know, I do love Kid Rock. I got to meet Kid Rock one time, and he said some of the funniest shit that I've ever heard out of my life. It was one sentence. I'm not going to say it here on the show, but it was really funny. All right, so we got no true crime updates. Do you want to just dive right into tonight's show, or do you want to?
Yeah, let's do it. Actually, I have.
Yeah,
like, you know, we joke about my grandma notes. I've got a lot. So it's
this show,
huh?
Write a book for tonight's episode.
I know, right? John's gonna illustrate it.
We've got Drums and Rums in the podcast tonight. Lastro Lopez joining us. Dead Leg Media. David J. We also got a super chat. $10 from David J. He says, Eric with no hat. Eric, blink twice if you're in danger. Somebody else I saw in there said, mention the word cantaloupe if you're in trouble. So yes, I like to have pineapple with my cantaloupe, and I have blinked as many times as I could. Speaking of which, we'll cover it tomorrow, but a Russian, I guess you'd say propagandist, where he's more of like a blogger, but he was blown up in a cafe with all of his followers, but he's pro-Russian. So there's like this big thing about that maybe it was Ukrainians that got to him in St. Petersburg. So big breaking news there today that we'll cover tomorrow's episode. But we appreciate all you guys in the live chats that are here. We thank you for supporting us. If you'd like to continue to support us, hit the like and subscribe button while you're on YouTube and join that paid membership if you'd like, or you can just send us a super chat like David J did there for $10. We appreciate that. Or you can just leave us a rating or review on SpyTunes or Spotify.
SpyTunes
or Spotify. Yep.
I like that.
Either one of those. I have been in the car for like 12 hours, so burnt out. Just came straight here tonight. Was in the mountains. Drew Breezy's actually in Vegas,
driving around in a convertible,
committing true crime,
likely.
But you got your grandma notes together. You ready to jump into this thing?
I do. So you know what we've been doing lately, guys, is talking a little bit about pop culture in the decade. We're taking this one all the way back to 1948. So take it for what you will, but let's talk about a couple of things that were going on in the world in 1948. This case takes place in Australia, but we're going to talk about like Eastern Bloc, Europe, America, and Australia as well. So it kind of goes all over. So we're going to talk about things in America in 1948. We have the assassination of Gandhi. An interesting one is Highway Gothic. That's a set of fonts that were designed specifically in 1948, to maximize legibility at a distance at high speed. So think about all the highway signs you see. That is called Highway Gothic. That is the font.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. In 1948.
I didn't even know that. It's a great trivia for a cop.
Right? Isn't that interesting?
That is great.
It's estimated that Bing Crosby recordings filled more than half of the radio time allocated to recorded music in 1948. This is interesting. Almost all chickens eaten today come from the winner of the 1948 Chicken of Tomorrow contest, whose genetics now dominate poultry farms worldwide.
Whoa.
So the winner of that chicken contest in 1948 is pretty much what you're having for dinner.
Oh, that's awesome.
No. Don't do that if you're getting married, please.
Oh, please do. I'm a huge fan of that. If you and I ever get married, we're doing it. And the
No, we're
macaroni
not.
back to back.
I'll watch you do it with your mom.
Could you imagine, Patsy?
Yes. Swiss engineer George de Mestral took his dog on a hike that year in 1948. Okay, so when he got home, he noticed that the little thing stuck to his dog's paws. There were all these burrs, right? So he decided to go on and examine one under the microscope. He was an engineer. They can do all sorts of things. He noticed that the burrs had small hooks that is, what enabled them to cling onto the dog's fur. A few years later, in 1955, he patented Velcro. Isn't that cool?
Velcro.
Velcro is great. Hook and loop.
I
So
hate
tired
when
too.
Velcro entered military life. It makes
Are you speaking of hook and loop?
yes.
Yeah.
Can't stand it.
It's loud.
It is loud. It makes no sense
It's
to
very
me.
loud. And it's not comfortable. It's very
Like you remember this is what I always said. Do you remember felt boards when you went to church?
Yeah.
And you had like the
They're
little
quiet. You
church
make quiet
animated
looks
figures.
out of them for kids. Yeah.
What they were so quiet.
Yeah.
And they
And they
did
stick.
virtually the same exact thing.
They don't stick that. But they come right off. Like you've got to tug a little much with the Velcro.
I mean, I'm sure though, but that was like come on, that was like 1980s felt technology. Like I'm sure
Could be
we've
better.
kind of stepped that game up by now. By the time they came up with Velcro in the army.
Maybe
I don't know.
that's something you
I've
should
just
look
never
into.
been into the Velcro.
I feel like
thing.
you're
I
not
just
busy
remember getting
enough,
my first
so-
Velcro army uniform and being like, "What in the actual fuck is this?" Not to mention that the colors were seafoam green. It was so bad, so bad.
Oh my gosh. Okay, maybe most importantly then, Cheetos. Cheetos were created in
Oh.
1948.
Huge Cheetos guy. Are you a Cheetos guy?
Yeah, I'm a Cheetos guy.
Do you remember the Cheetos
Hot
Tiger?
Cheetos.
Do you remember the Cheetos Tiger?
Yeah,
Chester, dude,
Right?
those were some great commercials back in the day.
There were so many back then.
Do you
had
remember
Tony the
commercials? Do you remember
Tiger.
just tuning in to like
Yeah.
primetime TV and
Yeah.
yeah,
Or Saturday morning.
we were just at the cabin and it's only VH. There's no internet up there. VHS and DVDs. And my 8-year-old put a VHS in
Mhm.
and was like, "Dad, I don't understand. Is this just a thing that just tells me about other movies, or is there a movie here? What is? I don't understand."
Commercial.
And I was like, "Yeah, those were called trailers, son."
Oh yeah, you're like it's basically one long ad since that's all they know now. Anyways, ads. It's just an ad. No, commercials were great back then. The Saturday morning went for all the cereals. What
Yeah.
else? It was like sugary
Yeah.
cereals,
Oh yeah,
perfume, cigarettes. You name it. It was like all the good commercials. They were all
Budweiser, the frogs back before
Yes.
Budweiser.
good.
Yeah.
The Ford F-Series truck was introduced. Barcodes were invented,
Oh,
which is super interesting to me. I didn't
thought
realize
that'd
that
been a
would
lot
have
older.
been agreed. So then, check this out. Perhaps one of the funnier ones. So Jimmy the Greek Snyder bet $10,000. It's a ton of cash in 1948 at a 17-1 odds on Harry Truman to defeat Thomas Dewey in the 48 election,
Mm.
which he did. But let's talk about why he did. He put this money on it because Dewey had a mustache, and Jimmy said American women don't trust men with mustaches. So
Mm.
that's why he thought Truman would win, and then Truman did win.
Mm.
So
Oh,
so
and do
there
you know
you
that Truman dropped the bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima?
yeah.
I just never think about like which president
did
did
what?
that. You know what I'm saying? But like, I feel like I don't know. That's a tough one, man.
We're actually going to talk about some bombs. We're going to talk a little bit about the Manhattan Project. We're going to talk about all kinds of things,
I like all that.
government or not. So buckle up.
I like all
Wake
those
up.
things. I like
Yeah.
all those things.
And there's some there's something for everybody in here. There's definitely some conspiracy you can take almost any angle here and go with it. So I'll be curious to hear what you guys think about this when it's all done. Leave it in the comments on the post that I made today. All right. So we're taking it back, like I said, to 1948 in Australia, specifically the city of Adelaide. Adelaide was on the west coast of southern Australia, about 450 miles northwest of Melbourne. All right.
Great wine production over there.
In Adelaide or Melbourne?
Adelaide. Melbourne's all right, but yeah, Adelaide's got some great wines.
Yes. So I don't know that. Well, you know what? I guess I do when I've bought wine at the store. I don't know it because I don't know the trivia. I know what the label says.
Yeah, Shiraz. That's what Andreas calls it. Shiraz.
Shiraz.
Hey, let me get some of that Australian Shiraz.
Sauvignon Blanc. Let me tell you the true crime of the week real quick. I gotta say this.
Okay.
So this weekend, I was out having a sweet time at a sweet dinner, and this dude is singing, right? Yeah. So first of all, he takes himself way too seriously as it is. There's no pitch, there's no tone, there's no whatever. But
you got to lose yourself in the moment. You own it, and you can never let it go.
If you're going to sit there and over this, food that is coming back to haunt everybody days later, I promise you about that. And you're going to tell me how much you love Chris Stapleton, and that's what you're going to sing for all the fine folks in the restaurant that night. And then when you sing Tennessee whiskey, you use the word bourbon. She's a smooth, it's
Wilmington bourbon.
It's called Tennessee whiskey. Like, I don't even understand where the confusion is here. Anyway, I just got to get that off my chest. That's been bothering me.
He said bourbon?
He said bourbon.
Fucker. That's almost as gay as Bud Light.
How you do that?
What?
God.
I don't know.
I say bourbon, it's in the title.
Right?
Like, I don't.
You gotta lose yourself in the music. The moment you own it, you gotta never let it go.
You only got
Tennessee bourbon.
All right. All right. So we've established where exactly this took place. So Adelaide, to give you a bit of a feel of the area, has a pretty low crime index. It's kind of like an airplane crash, though, right? Like, they don't happen often, but when they happen, it's big. There's not a lot of crime there. But when it happened, it was kind of big. So they were known for, John, if you tell this whole story, I'm on that. Yeah.
Andre and I would have had a great date if I didn't have to beat that dude's ass, Lazarus says. And then one more plug before we get started. But for our Patreon account, there might, I'm not making any promises, there might be a Last Row wine show on there. There might be a Last Row wine show somewhere.
I think there should be
on the Patreon. It could happen. I don't know.
I think that would be a fantastic idea. Bring it, Last Row. All right.
I just want Last Row and you to do true crime together one night, like on the Patreon.
That would have to be on Patreon. We've talked about he's got some podcast blood in his veins.
Oh, he's hilarious.
If he ever got that kidney stone out, I don't know if that ever happened.
Couldn't find out it wasn't a kidney stone, it was a paintball that got lodged up his asshole. All right, okay. I'm done.
All right. So what I said was it was kind of like big or nothing, meaning that they didn't have very much crime there, but when they did, it would be huge stuff. So a few serial things happen in there. And then if you may have heard of the Snowtown murders, more commonly known as the Bodies in Barrels murders, where there were 12 victims between the mid to late 90s. That happened here in Adelaide. So to give you a little reference, otherwise, pretty quaint little town. What's up, Drew? Drew says, guns up, giddy up from the desert. All right. So on November 30th of 1948, so you've got to remember, this is Australia. So their summertime is about to begin. All right. So it's getting warmed up there. You've got a picture, it's like beach, little rocky area there, and then some businesses and things across the street. All right. So 2 different couples will tell you that they recount that they saw a man lying on the beach on his back, somewhat propped up on some rocks, legs extended in front of him, ankles crossed. To any passerby, it would look like someone who's kind of napping. He is in a suit, but I think some people got a little heavy-handed with the alcohol there. I think for the most part, people just thought he had too much to drink and was taking him a little resty there on the beach.
And that happens a lot. I just saw the the spring break video where somebody got drunk and passed out, and then the friends were like, fuck it, and they left. And then 4 hours later, they wake up with like the worst sunburn like on the planet.
Oh,
you seen that video?
No, that's terrible though.
Oh, it looks bad.
I don't even think I want to.
Looks real bad. Those are some asshole friends.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's bad. So one of the couples said that they saw him around 7 p.m. that night on November 30th. David J. and John are about to get kicked out of the chats for telling this whole story. Or just actually tell it. I'm going to go to sleep because I'm tired. So at 7 p.m., one of the couples said that they saw the man extend his right arm almost fully out from beside his body, and then it went limp. Okay. So they just thought maybe he had too much to drink and had passed out. Another couple that came by that said that between 7:30 and 8, they saw him lying there. They didn't specifically see him move, but they knew that in the time that they were there, he had changed position. So at some point, he had moved while they were there. They didn't physically see it happen. Their biggest concern was that there was so many swarms of mosquitoes and he wasn't batting them away. So they thought that was odd. Again, though, they just thought he was passed out. Like they didn't think anything nefarious had taken place. They're just kind of minding their own business, moving right along. Right. So that happened the night of the 30th. We'll find out that later another person came forward, a witness came forward in 1959, so 11 years later, stating that he and 3 other people actually saw a well-dressed man carrying another man on his shoulders along the beach the night before the body was found. Who's to say? We talk about this all the time with witnesses, people that come forward many years later. It could be because they were nervous at first. It could be for a plethora of reasons, or it could just be for attention and they didn't see anything at all, right? So we don't know. Nothing came of that.
And maybe if you're like a vacationer, you're not looking at the
you've been
news,
out of town,
you didn't have the phones, and it took
internet.
11 years for them to like see the unsolved mysteries on.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, who's to say?
Right,
and this day and time is going to be, play to a lot of the way this case plays out, and all the advancements since then that we have, right? That's changed a lot. So the next day on December 1st at about 6:30 in the morning, police were called to the scene by some other people who had seen this body lying there, and at this point, I think it was unmistakable that this was a dead body at this point.
Right.
This was at the Somerton Park Beach, hence the name of the case, the Somerton Man. And this was about 7 miles southwest of Adelaide. He was originally believed to have just died in his sleep. That was the initial thought. Let's talk about a little bit about what he looked like, though, when they found him and some items that he had on him, because it starts to get a little interesting. He had, first of all, he was well dressed, and we're going to go over exactly what he had on, but he was in a suit.
I imagine everybody in 1948 was always well dressed, right?
Right.
Like that was the
nobody
time.
was wearing pajamas to the market.
Right.
Yeah.
We didn't.
People cared about their appearance.
You dressed a class up.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You didn't leave the house in certain like this, right? Like you, yeah. Exactly. So there was an unused train ticket from Adelaide to Henley, just the 2 towns there. So that had never been used. It had been purchased but not used. There was a bus ticket from Adelaide to Glenide that had been used. Okay. All right. So his suit, this is super interesting. It was, they say it was a nice tailored suit, but he had on a tie. All right. The tie, something I've never considered in my life, right? The tie had stripes that sloped to a negative gradient. This is the way they did in the US. In the UK and in Australia at the time, tie stripes always had a positive, quote, heart to sword gradient. So they went in a different diagonal direction. So the tie would render the idea that it was a US made tie.
Only in America.
The stripes go up and down.
Right.
this
And
way.
our toilets
Yep.
flush counterclockwise.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of things. He had on polished shoes. We're going to come back to this, but not only were they clean shoes, they were very newly polished. Interestingly enough, though, he was on the beach and these things were just about spotless. He had no hat, which was a bit atypical for that time period and particularly in that area. For a man to not have a hat on with a suit would not generally be the case. He had juicy fruit gum. So I looked more into manufacturers and locations and dates and times of juicy fruit gum than I ever thought I would. Very interesting things with their packaging, etc. But there was a facility in Melbourne at that time. The US had expanded to a facility in Melbourne to produce juicy fruit. So you could purchase it in Australia. It was still predominantly American. It had been used in rations for World War II. So we're in 1948 right now, all right, pushing 1949. So World War II ended in, 45? And they were still rationing goods at this point in Australia. So that could be neither here nor there, the gum, but it was definitely much more.
Basically, he's pointing that this guy may or may not, more probable than not being American.
So where he's from becomes one of the largest questions. And at every turn, it looks like he could be from somewhere else. Around the world. So you're exactly right. So he had a pack of cigarettes on him. The pack said Army Club. That was a very inexpensive brand at the time. Inside were 7 cigarettes. None had been smoked. There was no lighter, but there were Consitas. That was a UK brand. 7 Consita cigarettes. Again, a UK brand, not an American brand or an Australian brand. Inside this pack of a different name. These are about quadruple the price of the brand name of the pack that they were in. Okay. They never tested the cigarettes for poison. That's just something to consider. At every turn here, guys, and I think that this happens with this case particularly, the idea of confirmation bias, right? Where you think it's one thing, so you're going to make the case out to where it conforms to that, to where this is what you believe. I've definitely done it. I can tell you exactly what I think, or at least want to be the case, and things are pointing me in a different direction. But it'd be a lot more fun if it did. So he did have a pack of matches. These were of the Bryant and May brand. These were made in England. These were not made in Australia or the United States. All right. They were not found initially, though. He had a partially smoked cigarette on his right lapel. But he had an aluminum comb, which was manufactured in the U.S. And used often in the military in the U.S.
So probably an American, flew through, the U.K., landed there first, picked up some sick fags, some expensive fags. That's what they call cigarettes in the U.K. Threw them in his cheap cigarette box, right? Probably bought
maybe
Lucy's.
bum some from somebody. Like that's an option, right?
Yeah. Made his way over. Went to get a train ticket, got a little too drunk, missed the train, didn't use it. Freaking hopped a ride from a floozy out to Adelaide. Here we are.
Okay. Well, sounds like you've got it cracked. So y'all have a good night.
I got to figure out what happened. I mean, obviously he's dead. What happens next?
Yeah, so those are the things that they initially find on his person and kind of how he looked. So he looked to be, they aged him between 40, 45 years old. They continuously said that he was in great shape. He was very fit. He was about 5'11", top physical condition. He had grayish eyes, fair to ginger colored hair. He had slightly gray around the temples. That's always good. With a little broad shoulders, or he had broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Good. That's not bad.
Is this like a fantasy for you?
It's not bad.
You're like, ooh, yeah, a little pepper on the sideburns. That's
Wait till your mullet gets
ginger
a little gray.
hair.
I think you'll enjoy it.
Actually, there's a lot coming in on the sides. Somebody was quick to mention that today on the mountain trip this weekend. On the mountain trip. Oh, I like little gray hairs coming through. I was like, "Fuck you, bitch! Who fucking says that?" And you just meet
Do
somebody
not
for the
talk
first
to your
time.
mom that way, Eric.
It was not my mom, Andrea. Fuck. Oh, yeah.
All right. So he had broad shoulders and a narrow waist, hands and nails that showed no signs of manual labor. So this was not a laborer. He had big.
Pencil pusher.
This is an interesting one. So he had his toes and his feet were shaped in almost like a wedge shape. All right. So his toes were kind of pushed in together like a wedge. So they specifically said this would be like those of a dancer. So at the time, particularly like in the UK, like male professional ballerina. What do you call it? Is it a ballerina? If it's ballet dancers, ballerinos, ballet dancers would be an option. Or someone who wore boots. There were some not particularly wingtip, but like a square-toed shoe that was narrowed at the front for men at that time. So someone who wore these certain boots could have feet over the years that would be shaped that way. Regardless, something kind of changed the shape of his feet like that. He also had very pronounced calf muscles that they particularly noted were high. Like the calf muscles were right under the back of his knee, basically, very, very high. That again would point to someone, for like a woman that wears high heels over and over again, that's going to cause those higher calf muscles. Again, though, someone who could be a ballet dancer or in some elevated shoes or boots all the time. He was dressed in a white shirt with a red, white, and blue tie. He had brown trousers, socks, and shoes.
Red, white, and blue tie. This guy's an American.
Maybe. We know those stripes were American stripes.
They don't run. I'll tell you that much.
They don't run. This one didn't run. He had a knitted pullover and it said fashionable gray and brown double-breasted jacket. It said that it was reportedly American tailoring. All of the labels on his clothing had been removed. Again, he had no hat and he had no wallet. All right. He was clean shaven. There was no ID on him whatsoever. This is another reason police initially were leaning to suicide. All right. Because why would he need his wallet? Why would he need any ID? Maybe he didn't want to be found or found out. They couldn't match his dental records to anyone that was known. They did finally conduct an autopsy, and the pathologist estimated the time of death to be around 2 a.m. or so on the 1st of December. So I'm going to read a little bit about the autopsy. I won't get in the weeds too much about it, but it says that the heart was of normal size. The heart was normal in every way. This is important. Small vessels not commonly observed in the brain were easily discernible with congestion. When you hear congestion in terms of an autopsy in organs, what they're talking about is fluid. So generally speaking, blood and blood type fluids, sometimes other fluid and bubbles and these kinds of things, but that's what they're talking about is blood. So there's congestion of the pharynx. Let's see here. We don't need to go every inch of it. The stomach was deeply congested. There was congestion in the second half of the duodenum. That's part of your small intestine. There was blood mixed with food in the stomach. Both kidneys congested. The liver had a great excess of blood in the vessels. The spleen was 3 times the size it should be.
What causes all that?
Well, so acute gastritis hemorrhage, that means extra blood in the stomach and congestion of the liver and spleen and to the brain. Poison is one thing that will cause that. Poison will do it.
That'll do.
So that'll do it. That's one big, with all of the backup of congestion of blood and all of the organs and the enlarged spleen. The only thing missing, if it were poison at the scene, would be vomit. Generally speaking, you're going to have some sort of foaming and vomit to the nose and or mouth, if that were the case.
I'd like to get my buddy on here. It's a guy that special operations guy, really covert. He's out now. Just an incredible human being. I'd like to get him on, but he was actually on an anti-poaching task force. The guy took 2 rounds, one in the neck and one in the shoulder, on an child sex ring in like Cambodia or some shit.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I was like, what? He was like, yeah, we were under there under like private contract, taking down a child sex ring, and he took one like right through the neck. I got all the pictures. It's crazy. I'll try to get him on the show if he'll come on. He'll probably come on the Patreon for sure. But he was poisoned while he was on an anti-poaching operation in Africa.
With what? Do you know?
It was a huge ordeal. I don't know. I'd like to get him on, but like, it was a huge thing. I got like this guy also got blown up in Afghanistan. I mean, this dude's got like, he's got Purple Hearts. He took a Hamas rocket. He was like in a building that got hit by a Hamas rocket. Like he did some Interpol. The guy's phenomenal. It's like killer dude. He was one of the groomsmen at my wedding too, which is kind of cool. But he got poisoned. Yeah. And he they had to like fly him out. But luckily, like the tribal dude that they were poaching with, like immediately recognized the symptoms and were like, yo, you've been poisoned. Let's roll. And so they like life flighted him.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to hear more about that.
So that might be like a kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Like a European kind of like deserty.
Lastro just said Africa, he was probably poisoned by poison. All right. I'm not doing a podcast with you, Lastro.
Ever.
Ever.
But I'll tell you what, though, it's not poison, but it's like poison. And I feel like I've been poisoned every time I lay down on my ghost bed because I'm out like a light. Doesn't matter what's going on in my life. It sleeps so good that it's literally scary. When you were telling the story about this guy falling asleep on the beach and they didn't know how he could fall asleep with all the mosquitoes. First thought was, did they have ghost beds in 1948? And did they have any traveling additions? Because if he was on a traveling ghost bed, I would sleep through mosquitoes eating my face as well. Right now on our site, which is ghostbed.com/wolfpack, 50% off of all bundles, 40% off a site wide. This is an update from the 35%. So we've gone up a tier. Dude, you guys sent me like 2 more messages from last week about buying ghost beds. I love that. And I send it over to Rich from Ghostbed. He eats that shit up too. So thank you guys for purchasing all these ghost beds. All bundles are 50% off on the site right now. Just go to the site and take a look at these bad boys. If you want a bundle, you can get everything that you want. If you want it all, just bundle it all together, baby. Get you that adjustable base. It's all about that base. They got that zero gravity TV mode, the ZZZZZZ mode, the massage mode, which is my favorite. Got all those USB ports that you always can charge up your shit. And the most popular combo right now is the Split King Luxe mattress with the adjustable base. And again, all that stuff is like 50% off right now, guys. So beds are made in the good old USA. If you've got Lázaro Lopez credit, you can probably afford one. 0% down, 0% financing. Again, if you've got Lázaro Lopez credit. So anyway, that's it for our ad read. Thank you so much, Ghostbed, for everything you do. And for the fans out there, get you a Ghostbed. Sleep like the Somerton man, except you'll wake up the next morning feeling much better than he did, I imagine.
Or just you'll wake up.
You'll wake up. So this guy did not wake up.
He did not wake up. No.
So they think he's poisoned and he's a dancer.
Well, we don't know. I mean, again, he could have worn like elevated work boots. Well, I say work boots. He wore some sort of a shoe that was elevated. He didn't show signs of being a laborer based on his hands, like no calluses and, dirty fingernails, these kinds of things. Okay. So the autopsy also showed that his last meal was a pasty. 3 or 4 hours, just like a, I think they described it kind of like a little hot pocket, basically, like what we would know to be a hot pocket.
Dolomite sandwich.
Yes, a Vegemite. There was no foreign substance in the body. The doctors at this point are saying that they do not believe now that the death was natural. So even if it was, whatever, either he was murdered, he committed suicide. This was not a cardiac event. This wasn't a stroke or something that he passed away from that was natural whatsoever. But they could not figure out who this guy was. We do know that there was a certain kind of stitching called feather stitching that was on a coat that he had. And that was only done in the USA. Sorry, my notes are mixed up. So finally, USA. So finally, on December 10th, the body was embalmed. Police said that this was the first time they realized they needed to embalm him. Still, there was no positive identification. Now, about a year later. Sorry, wait, I'm about 40% eliminate reference. No. About a year later, in 1949, on January 14th, staff at the Adelaide train station found there was a checked in room where they would kind of store the stuff that had been checked in there. Found a brown suitcase. This had no label. The records indicated that it had been checked in on November 30th, 1948, after 11 a.m. So November 30th was the night, the last time we know to him, the dead man at least, to have been alive. Okay. So they believe that this suitcase did belong to the man found there on the beach. Inside the suitcase, there was a dressing gown, red felt pair of slippers, 4 pairs of underpants, pajamas, electrician screwdriver, shaving items. There was a table knife that had been cut off and kind of sawed down to be a small, sharp instrument. So, I mean, I'm sorry, not a table knife, well, yes, but a kitchen knife that has now been kind of modified as a weapon. There was a pair of scissors that they specifically noted with sharpened ends, and a stenciling brush, which is interesting. This would be what an officer would use to make stencils on cargo, like on a merchant ship. A light brown pair of pants. These had sand in the cuffs. But the most interesting thing was a thread card of this certain kind of thread. It was Barber brand orange waxed thread. This was considered an unusual type, and it was not available for purchase in Australia. This happens to be the same as the thread that had been used to mend a pocket in his pants. All clothing labels were removed. However, the name T. Keane, Keane, all right, T. Keane was found on a tie. Keane was found on a laundry bag, and Keane was found on what they call a singlet. That would be like a tank top. All right. Wartime rationing was still being enforced, as I said. T. Keane missing in any English-speaking country. The dry cleaning tags, there were 3 or 4 dry cleaning numbers, and there were no results that came back from that. The feather stitching that I mentioned was found on a coat that was in the suitcase, and this again indicates it was made in the U.S. because machines in Australia were not producing this kind of stitching at this point. The coat had not been imported, so the coat had to have been purchased in America. So either he bought it there or he got it from someone who had gotten it in America. All right. They looked at the incoming train records. The man had arrived at the Adelaide railway station by overnight train, either from Melbourne, Sydney, or Port Augusta. The rest, there's a lot of speculation here. He did purchase a ticket for the 10:50 train to Henley Beach, but for whatever reason, he didn't board. Remember, that unused train ticket was in his pocket on the beach. He did immediately go on and check his suitcase at the station cloakroom there. He left and at some point caught a city bus to Glenelg, which he did have that used bus ticket there in his pocket. So Coroner Thomas Erskine Cleland stated that the investigation started the investigation, days following the discovery of his body. But they wound up finally kind of closing up shop on that around June 17th. So about 6 months later, they stopped the investigation. His shoes, they noted again, were remarkably clean and appeared to have been recently polished. So if he had been traversing Glenelg all day and going through town, this didn't make sense for how clean his shoes were. Do remember that, again, not trying to point toward confirmation bias here, but one of those witnesses that came forward a decade later that had stated that they saw a well-dressed man carrying another man on his shoulders the night before this guy was found on the beach. All right. So if he was carried to the spot he was in, his shoes may be very clean. He also may not have vomit all around him, right? These are just things to consider. Let's see here. So one option could be something like, so Cedric Stanton Hicks, this was a professor of physiology and pharmacology at the University of Adelaide there. So he testified that a group of drugs, at this point, this was speculation. He said there's a couple of groups of drugs that could have been used. If you're looking at poisoning, which is reasonable to look at based off of this autopsy that we have, even though it was inconclusive in terms of what the poison was. We didn't have any idea what the poison was. He talks about these drugs that would be extremely difficult, if not even impossible, to identify, even if they had been given, in large quantities. The reason the names of these drugs at the time were not released to the public, they didn't release the names of the drugs they theorized this to be until the 80s. Because prior to that, you could just go to a chemist and tell them that you wanted this, and all these like herbalists and natural healers and whatnot were using these, but they had a very narrow therapeutic index, meaning it's very difficult to use these correctly without detrimental effects, or conversely, even just to cause help in a body. So people were having bad side effects from these. And so he didn't want to go out there and just throw out this name so that everyone knew they could go obtain these medicines. Well, what the medicines were digitalis, and a lot of you may know that one. It's a cardiac medication, and wabane. So both of these are cardiac medications. We have I won't nerd out on physiology stuff, but we do have like a sodium potassium pump in our heart. These drugs both work toward that function. All right. So just know that that's what they do. People are given this now for arrhythmias, for all sorts of ventricular problems in your heart. These are medicines. Digitalis is used quite frequently in conjunction with other medications in the hospital, or for people to take at home. Digitalis is also derived from a very common plant that a lot of us would have in the yard called the foxglove. It's a very poisonous plant because of this right here. So you could, at that time, you could have just gone to a chemist and gotten these drugs, which is super interesting. So anyway, so at the time the doctor was saying this is a real possibility, and no matter how much of this you've been given, we wouldn't be able to detect it in the autopsy. And it would cause what we saw in his body on the autopsy. All right. So let's see here. So early on, that guy we were just talking about, that physiologist, said that he would be prepared fully to find that the man had died from poison. Either way, he didn't feel like it was an accidental thing. He didn't think it was accidentally administered, whether the Somerton man gave it to himself or someone else did this to him. He also thinks that if he had been carried, like I said, he was of the theory that Somerton man had been, Megan just said digitoxin. That's another name here for that. If he had been carried there again, that there wouldn't be vomit or these other things. Now, there was not a big disturbance in the sand. Keep that in mind. But obviously people can kind of, scratch out things or make it look natural, I guess, depending on what the tide was doing. That's going to take care of a lot of that as well. So after this investigation, they went on and made, sometimes it's referred to as a death mask. For him, it was actually an actual bust because they included his shoulders. All right. So this isn't something we do now. At the time, they would do these death masks, and it would just, it would maintain the likeness of the facial features and these kinds of things. They did with him. And so we have some pictures. I meant to email them to you. Regardless, they're on, go to Andrea Upload. I put a couple on Failure to Stop, and you can see that plaster cast. And it's just, I always think those are so, those death masks are always so creepy to me, because it's just, okay, I'm not talking to you, John. All right. So now it gets crazy. They've gone back on another investigation of his clothing. On first pass, they didn't catch this. On second pass, they look at his pants. And if you think about, if you wear a pair of jeans, or in that fifth pocket, the fob pocket, if you will, there was a rolled up piece of paper. All right. This stated, "To mom should," or should. It's SHUD. This was translated to mean it is ended or finished. They didn't know what this meant. They had to have the local library call around and have this translated, because it was originally written in Persian, or Farsi, if you will. So again, that said, "Tamam should," which means it's finished. This was found on the last page of the Rubaiyat of a poet, Omar Khayyam. All right. So this had been translated. Police issued a photograph of that scrap. So they took that scrap, sent it out, and now they're on a hunt to find the book this came from. All right. So they are looking all over Australia. They can't locate a book like this anywhere. It takes forever. Finally, a man, after reading an article about this, came forward to say that he had this book in his car. It's a little uncertain as to how it got there or what, but they found it either in the rear well of the car or in the rear floorboard. The theme of this Rubaiyat, of this book, means that you should live life to the fullest and have no regrets when it's time to die, basically, right? What is this deal? The book was missing a small rectangle of paper that should have the words "to mom should" on the last page. The book that they found in this guy's car was missing this rectangular piece of paper that would be the one that was matching what was in that dude's pocket, right?
Whoa.
In the back of the book, there were indentations that represented like 5 lines of text in all capital letters. So think about like if you're a kid and you want to pretend to decode, something with your friend, and you put a paper on top of paper and write, and then you remove the paper and there's indentations left. This was left on the last page of the book. I can show you. Well, I can't. Just look on my Instagram. But it would be capital letters. The top line, I'll just kind of read it to you. It's going to make no sense to anyone, is WRGOABABD. Sounds like a Nintendo code. The second line is crossed out. The third line is WTBIMPANETP, and so on and so forth. So there's 5 lines of that. All right. So they do their best to decode this. At first, they thought this was like some sort of foreign language. It was not. Code experts from the time were called in to handle this. You got to think again. We're coming right out of World War II. They're on their codes. I feel like at this point. Okay, so they're coming in to take a look at this, decipher this. They were unsuccessful. Finally, in 1978, actually, so now it's been 30 years. The Department of Defense cryptographers analyzed it. They said that it was going to be impossible to provide a satisfactory answer. They said that if it was encrypted, the fact that it was so short means that it was insufficient symbols. Basically, they're like, there's just no way we can decode this, right? Sorry, I say it that way because I'm trying for everyone to believe that he was a spy. That's what I'm deciding for myself.
Yeah. A ballet dancer spy.
Yes. So, eventually, Derek Abbott is a man who takes over, kind of really looking into this. He's a professor, and so up into like the early 2000s. So Abbott's team, they were under the impression that every letter represented, the first letter of a word. Maybe it was shorthand, maybe it was text, whatever. Either way, it's to this day not been deciphered. That we don't know what that was. So let's talk about a woman named Jessica Thompson. She's going to be referred to as Jestyn, Jestyn, in a lot of things. I don't like licorice either, John, so I'm with you there. A telephone number was also found. So this book was missing the rectangular piece of paper that had the words that were rolled up in Dead Man's Pocket. It had that 5-line code of some sort, whatever that was imprinted on there. It also had a phone number. They call the phone number. They get in touch with a woman named Jessica Thompson. She was a nurse who lived right there where he was found, about 1,300 feet from where his body was found specifically. So they go to her house to talk to her. She said she didn't know him. She didn't know why he would have her phone number. And she didn't know why he would visit her suburb on the night of his death. But she did report that sometime in 1948, a man that she didn't know had attempted to visit her and asked her neighbor about her. So the detectives say that when they interviewed her, so one of the detectives wrote a book on this. There's quite a few books about this. In 2002, he wrote a book, and he said that she was just super evasive. She either didn't wish to talk about it. He fully believed that she did know his identity for sure. Her daughter later said in, I think, 2014, that she, on 60 Minutes, that she did think that her mother knew the dead man. So in 1949, Jessica Thompson, that nurse, requested that police, she did not want a permanent record of her name or her part in the interview whatsoever. She thought it would be embarrassing and harmful to her reputation. Now, we do know, again, it's 1949. I think she had a few relationships and questionable paternity of one of her kids. And so, this would be looked at disgracefully or looked bad upon her. And so, you could argue that too. She really didn't want, if she'd had any dealings with this guy, which she said she didn't, she just kind of didn't want her name thrown out there to the public like that. Fast forward, we know her name because after she died in 2007, her kids and everybody said her name. They didn't care for it to be out there. So they said you can disclose her name. So anyway, she was shown the plaster cast. So they take her to where they have that bust that they made of this man, right? They said she immediately said that she couldn't identify it, but when she saw it, she gasped and she looked like she was going to faint and she turned away. And she said she didn't know who it was, but she refused to look at it again.
It's like Ron DeSantis trying to say Trump's name. He's like, won't say it. Like, who's getting indicted today? And he's like, oh, no. And she's like,
nope.
I don't know who that is. I don't fucking know who that is.
No idea.
Wow. They're like, ma'am, your pupils dilated. Like,
she's like, I don't.
Something fierce.
Don't even see a bus.
Nah, never heard of her.
No, I don't even know.
Damn. So why wouldn't she say shit? Like, if she, because I mean,
it gets more. I promise.
I don't
it
know.
gets
Like
even
nurses,
more
like in the movie, the nurses are always spies. A lot of the movies.
Well, we're gonna talk more about Jessica.
You're a nurse. You could be a spy for all we fucking know.
Don't you worry about that.
You got bones. You got bones in your closet.
John wants me to bring those to the meetup.
She's got bones on the floor and I'm sorry. So Megan Brossman says it's jarring seeing that kind of thing. A bust? Like, I don't walk into a museum and be like,
it's kind of, I mean, it's of a dead dude. Here, I'll show you on here.
Oh, is it like, it's not like a statue bust?
No, it's his like death mask, right? It's I'll show you right here.
So it is kind of a Gasper type thing?
Well, I mean, I don't think that it is, but if you know him, it would be.
Oh yeah, that's not. Dude, that's not
like gruesome, but
no. He was a handsome guy, it looks like.
That's actually not even. I'll show you. Yeah, this is him. This is him dead. So in this photo here,
he looks handsome. Oh yeah, he looks American as fuck. He looks like an American.
Yeah, when they conducted his autopsy, the first thing is they said, of course, they're in Australia, and they said he looked British in nature. So again, she said she didn't know him. She lost it. She wouldn't look at it any longer, right? So she did say that when she worked at this certain army hospital, like during the war, that she'd owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, of that book. And in 1945, she gave it to an Australian army lieutenant named Alf Boxall. Okay. Boxall, remember that name. So she says, nope, I had that book and I gave it to this other guy. Didn't give it to whoever just told you they had it in their car. I gave it to Alf Boxall. Okay. She's now currently, at this time, she was engaged to be married and getting married to a man, in her home. But she said back in 45, she had given it to this dude, Boxall. After the war ended, she moved to Melbourne and she got married. So she was getting married to this Thomas guy. So then police started suspecting that this guy Boxall must be the guy that's dead, right? So they have to try to track him down and see if he's dead. But in July of 49, they found Boxall alive and well, and he did have a copy of the Rubaiyat, but its final page was intact with the words "To Mom Should." So regardless, the book that was found in the back of the car with this woman's phone number is the one that was missing the part that was in the dead man's pants. Right? Why
are there so many copies of this book rolling around?
At this point, it was widely published. It was one of those where maybe not everyone had heard of it, but once
like
it was
Latin, a seriously funny true story.
Yes, like everyone knew about it. Exactly.
Once it came
it's
out,
basically
everybody had
the
a copy
same.
of it.
Gotcha. Worldwide. Translated in multiple languages. Yes, exactly. So So they found Boxall. So at this point, the FBI is involved. They ran the fingerprints to the best of their ability, which yielded zero positive identification. Scotland Yard got involved. There were no help. Imagine that. So we have a few different theories. One is that that he was there on the Warsaw Pact, and that would be why they couldn't identify him. They say, could he have been a spy? Right? Maybe, right? So maybe he was European, but trained to be American, Aussie, etc. Maybe he was a double agent. This is exactly what was going on then. It's Cold War. I mean, just the crux of all of this right now.
Oh, come on, mate. I'm American, man. Look at my accent, mate. Look at my tie, man. Mate, I'm American as fuck.
Why does your Aussie sound like
It's not. That was an Australian trying to talk like an American, but convince them that he's American, but he's really Aussie. So he talks like a redneck, but uses the word mate. And also maybe he says, take off you hoser. I don't know why he says that, but
what if he was like Eastern Bloc trained to be Aussie and American?
I don't know.
Don't do it. Just
I'm not a linguist.
Clearly. All right. So that's one of the theories. Southern Australia at this time was a place that was used for nuclear testing. Okay. So they needed these wide expanses of land, and Southern Australia brought that. So Britain was in conjunction with this testing. There was a lot of Cold War tension at this time. So for instance, here's an example, because some of the naysayers would say things like, but would a spy just be dead there on the beach? Well, yeah, he could be. And one example is in 1943. So just a few years prior, there was a corpse that had been planted with very realistic looking top secret information on him, right? This is exactly what they would do. This was with the intent to fool German high command into thinking that the Allies were going to invade Greece and Sardinia instead of Sicily. So yes, a spy could be found dead on a beach on purpose. They could.
Or do we think this guy just was hooking up with this lady, gets her pregnant, and homeboy husband fucks him up?
Maybe. You need to learn a little bit more about her, though.
Oh.
So persistently people have chosen to think or believe that he was a spy. So there were at least two sites that were pretty close to Adelaide, the city where this took place, that spies had interest in. That would be the Radium Hill uranium mine and the Woomera test range. I think someone was just talking about that a minute ago in the chats. There's like an Anglo-Australian military research facility there. So that's kind of what I spoke on a minute ago. This was right around the time that the ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organization, was founded. There were just a lot of moving parts at this point, a lot of things going on. All right. So this would be, there was a crackdown on Soviet espionage in Australia right around this time. The Venona Project, look that up. There are so many, for all you conspiracy, I mean, there are so many fun, weird, government operated projects going on at this point that are pretty wazoo. Anyway, so we'll come back around from that. We all know that the nurse gave the book, Jessica gave the book to Boxall, right? So that man Boxall, remember she said, yeah, I had it, but I gave it to this guy, and they find him, but that's not the one that was related to the dead guy. He was evidently reportedly involved in intelligence work during and immediately after World War II. We also know that in 94, we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, but this is kind of on purpose. This guy, John Harper Phillips, he was the chairman of the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine, reviewed the case. Again, this was in 94 to determine the cause of death and concluded that there seems little doubt it was digitalis. And that's one of the drugs that we talked about earlier that would be a very reasonable assumption. All right. So we're going to move forward a little bit. In 2017, that Abbott guy that I talked to you about, that was a professor that started kind of looking into this case, has basically devoted decades to trying to figure this out, used hairs that were extracted from the bust. So from that death mask, they were able to get 3 hairs. They used those hairs with the technology we had in 2017 to test and see what they could find out here. So for a long time, people speculated that Nurse Jessica's son, Robin, was in fact the dead guy's son, biologically. All right. After testing, observation, Robin was diagnosed with having some genetic conditions. So now Robin is getting older, but here's what the dead guy had 2 things going on with him that were very different than most people. So his ears, for instance, I can try to pull up a picture. There's a couple of parts of the outer ear without getting into too much detail, but you have the Simba on the top portion, right? So like the top, under the top fold of your ear, and the cavum, which is the part that would go basically lead into the canal of the ear. So here we are. Most people's cavum, the bottom part, is going to be a larger opening than the top, that Simba portion.
Right.
Not for this guy. He had a genetic condition to where it was actually the opposite. So let's see here if we have I've got a picture somewhere. If I can't pull it up, I've got it on my Instagram. Okay, so here's an idea.
Just go to our Instagram. Just go to Andrea Uplate.
Yeah.
On Instagram. Can't miss it.
When you see it, you'll know, because
guy.
It's an odd.
Is this Robin's kid or is it not Robin's kid?
Well, so listen. So the dead man.
I'm gonna say it's Robin. Robin's, that's his dad.
You're gonna say what that is?
Yeah. That
Robin is okay. So.
But I want you to do it like the TV show. The hair samples. Survey says from the hair sampling that we collected from the bust that
ding ding ding. He is your father.
He is?
No, we don't know that. So listen, so 1% of people have that genetic condition with the ear shape that I just talked about.
Yeah, right.
Dead guy has it, Robin has it. Then dead guy has another condition called hypodontia, where basically he was missing we have around 28 teeth as adults. Let's say once you're 32, if you haven't had your wisdom teeth pulled, he was missing 18 of his teeth. Now, dead guy. Now, it wasn't.
So he was British,
right? But listen, so he was born without the condition to continue to make these teeth. But what happened is, it's not like he had gaps in his smile. So when he smiled, it looked like he had a full set of teeth. It's that the teeth he was missing just never grew in. So all the teeth came together. So you wouldn't necessarily know, like most of the space would have been in the back. So for instance, he didn't have his, like these insides. So he had his 2 front teeth, and then directly beside those would be his canines. Right. So like there's just certain teeth. So only 2% of the population have that particular condition. Robin had that as well.
Oh, bam, dude.
Right?
Robin's your kid, dog. So this is just a case of I can't let anybody know. I'm going to go talk to my bestie, and we're going to poison this motherfucker, get him drunk at the bar, drop his ass off. Case solved.
Maybe.
Ain't no spy.
Maybe. So they really start to investigate this, and now they're using those strands of hair that I talked to you about. So we have that bust that they're using the hairs. It's tough right now because you can do nothing else with the body, really, with the formaldehyde that they used. It destroyed a lot of the DNA. The brown suitcase, for instance, was destroyed in 1986. Witness statements have disappeared from police files over the years. So Jessica Thompson relatives, her husband died in 95 and she passed away in 2007. But in November 2013, 3 of their relatives gave interviews to a news organization, or actually talked on 60 Minutes, excuse me. So her daughter said that her mother was the woman interviewed by the police and that her mother told her she had lied to the authorities. Jessica did not know the identity of the Somerton man. or excuse me, Jessica did know the identity of the Somerton man, and his identity was also, quote, known to a higher level than the police force. This is what her mother had told her, but that's all she told her. She suggested that her mother and Somerton may have both been spies, noting that her mother taught English to migrants, was interested in communism, and could speak Russian, although she would not disclose to Kate why she had learned it or where. So,
She's a spy. Two
I just think that's
spies. This is like
I
a
mean,
James Bond episode.
maybe
dude.
her daughter, was lying, but I don't for attention. I don't know why she would in 2013, that many years later, come forward and say, yeah, I mean, I was young, but mom just told me that basically, yeah, I know him, but it's not any other business, essentially.
We can't do like a 23andMe with this dude?
We
Can't
can.
do a little Ancestry.com with this dude?
Yeah, we can.
Okay,
We can.
let's do it.
Let's do it. All right.
All right.
So in October of 2019, so now we've moved forward from 1948, we're all the way up to a few years ago. They were granted a private pay exhumation. This was important because they had tried to exhume this body before a couple of times, but Australia's rules on this, like basically intense curiosity is not going to do it. So just because he was unknown, that wasn't enough to exhume this body.
Mhm.
So finally in 2019, they get it granted that they could do it. And they use all this DNA, and Abbott, the guy that was kind of the head of this research, he and this woman named
COVID.
Colleen Fitzpatrick, they actually they say that this man is a man named Carl Webb, someone entirely different, not that Robin that we just spoke with, who was an electrical engineer and an instrument maker, born in 1905 in Melbourne. So he was indigenously Australian. So Abbott says, the investigator says that the DNA ID from the strands of the hair that were found in the death mask is what he used, and that they found, we've talked about this before, how they can kind of narrow down these gene pools and triangulate to get families and narrow it down from there. So that's what they did. They found
Fucking Carl.
descendants of two distant cousins of Webb, both on the paternal and the maternal side, but none of his, he had no living relatives that had ever known him. There were, at first, they didn't have any pre-death photos of Webb, but then they found some potentially photos of him from a photo album in the 20s. There's just not a lot known about this guy. So if this is who it is that the DNA
He's
is
from
saying,
Melbourne.
Right. Well, so the forensic science, in South Australia, we're still investigating. They didn't comment on it. Basically, the government still has to rule on this. The police still have to rule on it. So if just because this independent exhumation happened and they do this genealogical testing, doesn't mean that they've ruled, that it's legally now, this Webb guy.
Right.
So the government still hasn't spoken to that yet.
Huh.
Carl, though, if it's who they say it is based off of these strands of hair, now there's some problems with that too, because other people will contend that the hair was without follicles and that the methods that they used to test this hair were less than completely proper. There was the guy who basically hands the hair over to this guy to test. We don't for sure know where it came from. No one saw him get the hair. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
There's just a lot of loopholes to after this many years conclusively say it's this guy, but then you can kind of unravel that a little bit too. But let's say it is this Carl Webb. Carl was born in a suburb of Melbourne. He worked at the family bakery until it closed and became an electrical instrument maker. He gets married. It was a volatile marriage. He didn't have many friends, and he was violent. He wrote a lot of poems. Many of his poems concerned death. He had attempted suicide on at least one occasion during the marriage. His wife split from him in 46. In 47, he moved out, and she never sees or hears from him again. 1947. So finally, some years had gone by. In 1951, she finally filed for divorce. I mean, she wanted to divorce him anyway. Things were a bit different back then. They granted it to her about a year later. Whatever, she's divorced. It is speculated potentially that maybe Carl had gone to Adelaide intending to find her. His oldest sister was married. Carl's oldest sister was married to a man named Thomas Keene. Say it with me. Do you remember what Thomas Keene was? T. Keene. That was the name found on the inside of the clothing.
Yeah.
We know that his sister and her husband Thomas had a son named John who died in World War II in 1943. So
Okay.
John had possessions indicating that he had lived in the U.S. at some point. So potentially Carl, if this is Carl, got this clothing from his brother-in-law or nephew that would have the goods from the U.S. and things from other places, not just found in Australia, right? So that's an idea. I mean, it even gets into, it's pretty interesting to me. Not everybody would love it, but it gets into the arsenic, lead, strontium found in his system and how they can use these things and the levels of them and where they kind of peak and then drop back off to see where he's traveled and what he's been eating in the weeks prior to his death. So that kind of gives like a pattern there. It's just interesting. The problem people have with the hair is that the hair sample that was used was given to that Professor Abbott by this guy named Paul Lawson. But people just really speculate that it didn't come from that plaster cast. So people think if you're in that camp, you would think that because you think that this was a government gig and that they had to finally identify someone. They give some rando hairs of a guy who basically barely exists because he doesn't have any family that has ever known him. They do trace his roots back to America, actually, as a whatever great grandson of Thomas Jefferson, I believe. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, what a crazy case. What a crazy fucking case.
There's more,
what
but not for tonight.
What do you think? You still think he's a spy?
I really want to.
I want to believe. Would you be willing to do a follow-up and give us some more of the gory details of this case on a Patreon Nightshift After Dark?
Yes, that's what we're talking about. You guys vote on some names. John and I have been talking about Night Shift After Dark, Night Shift at night, Night Shift in the dark,
Night Shift After Hours.
After Hours, Night Shift PM. I thought that was funny. It sounds like a cold medicine, though.
Yeah, because we still can get like the aunt of Dylan Rounds. She's still like in contact with her. I just haven't really reached out to her just because just haven't done it. But if we have Patreon, that's like a perfect way. It's like a perfect place to do it all, because then we can say whatever the fuck we want without having to worry about getting kicked off the old YouTubes. Yeah, the old YouTube web. So anyway, you guys, stay tuned for you audio listeners out there. We hear you. We spend a lot of time addressing our YouTube chats. We do a lot of things behind the scenes with our YouTube chats, but we know that you feel left out, and we're gonna make sure that you get yours. Everybody's gonna get everybody's. Oh, you got little Feather Stop stickers.
Yes, I'm gonna take these to the meetup. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. I was like, those are either stickers or Pogs, but Pogs aren't around.
That would be cool.
Yeah, very cool. And I think John made some bookmarkers or something, or some postcards for us to autograph and sign for folks.
Those are super cool, and they actually have excerpts from your book on the back, which I didn't know until after the fact. So those are really cool.
I literally have had internet back for like the last 3 hours. I have been without internet since Saturday. So I finished all my emails before I came on tonight, and I did one Instagram post, which I'm guessing is doing something because it's been lighting up all night. But that was a great case.
Hey, John, will you comment for me in the chats, because I can't sign in to StreamYard?
Why can't you sign into StreamYard?
I don't think we'll talk about it in a little bit.
I'll get you a login, girl. All right. Well, we will see you guys. Drop your deli. We'll see you guys. We'll see you guys on the next episode of Feather Stop Night Shift. Don't forget, tomorrow we'll be live for the paid members, myself and Deadleg Media, going over all the Trump stuff, the Bud Light stuff. We'll be covering the Russian who was blown up, all sorts of crazy things that are just going on. Really unprecedented is my most unfavorite word, but literally everything that's going on now is like legit unprecedented.
It's
like all this shit is so crazy. The attack on, like the blatant attack on Christians, and blatant attack on gun rights. I mean, it's all just so crazy. We're going to talk all about it tomorrow on Last Call. So, and then followed up Thursday with Comp Center and then Friday Breakdown. So lots coming on the Photostop channel. We're getting better every week. Notice that internet looks good. And all right, guys, until next time, guns up, giddy up.
Good night, y'all.